In the 1860s, two men on opposite sides of the Atlantic were fighting wars of unification at the same time. In 1861, Abraham Lincoln became president as the United States broke apart into civil war. In 1862, Otto von Bismarck became Prime Minister of Prussia, tasked with turning a patchwork of German states into a single nation. Lincoln was trying to hold an existing country together. Bismarck was trying to create one. And both faced the same problem. How do you create unity when power is divided and disagreement is unavoidable? They answered that question very differently. Lincoln kept rivals close and worked with them. Bismarck kept opponents apart and isolated them. You're leading a country at war. Half your cabinet thinks you're unqualified. One openly mocks you, and another believes he should be president instead. Most leaders would fire them, but Abraham Lincoln did the opposite. Lincoln deliberately filled his cabinet with rivals, men who doubted him, challenged him, and in some cases actively undermined him. William Seward thought that Lincoln was politically naive. Salmon Chase believed himself to be morally superior, and Edwin Stanton dismissed Lincoln as completely unqualified. And yet, Lincoln appointed all of them. Historian Doris Goodwin later called it a team of rivals. Lincoln believed that leadership was not about surrounding yourself with loyalists, but about bringing the strongest minds into the room, even when they disagreed with you. He understood something uncomfortable. Powerful personalities do not disappear when you exclude them. They remain critics, only now outside of your control. By bringing his rivals into the cabinet, Lincoln forced disagreement into the open, where it could be managed. But this only worked because of how he managed them. Lincoln practiced what we might call strategic empathy, a disciplined effort to understand what motivated the people around him. He paid close attention to ambition, insecurity, pride, and fear. He knew Seward craved recognition as an international statesman. He knew Chase wanted moral authority and public credit. And he knew that Stanton valued competence above everything else. This instinct to seek understanding before judgment shaped how Lincoln responded even to personal attacks. Early in his career, Stanton ridiculed Lincoln publicly. Lincoln didn't respond with resentment. Instead, he observed Stanton's ability and he learned to appreciate his skills and abilities. And many years later, when the war demanded a stronger Secretary of War, Lincoln appointed the very man who had mocked him. And Edwin Stanton ended up becoming one of Lincoln's closest allies and a figure many historians consider essential to the Union's ability to effectively wage and ultimately win the Civil War. Not because Lincoln demanded loyalty, but because he placed trust where others would have sought revenge. Lincoln also absorbed criticism without reacting impulsively. He encouraged open disagreement. He listened more than he spoke. And when attacked, he often responded with humor or stories instead of confrontation. And when his anger did rise, he wrote furious letters that he never sent, as a way for him to release emotion without destroying relationships. Lincoln understood that difficult people are not obstacles to leadership. Handled well, they can become a source of strength. The task here is not to silence your rivals, but to understand what drives them and to bind them together to something larger than themselves. That is how Lincoln held a divided cabinet together through civil war toward saving the Union and ultimately ending slavery. And here we see leadership in its hardest form. working with people you would rather avoid, not because they agree with you, but because they are the best, and because the goals matter more than your own comfort. When Bismarck became Prime Minister of Prussia in 1862, his first problem wasn't foreign enemies. The system of governance was blocked. Parliament refused to approve funding for army reform. Political parties expected him to fall, and on paper, Parliament could block him. Bismarck asked a simple but practical question: who could actually stop him? The king supported him, tax collection continued automatically, and the constitution did not specify what should happen if a budget wasn't passed. So he acted. He did not dissolve parliament or stop debate. He simply governed around it. For several years, the army was funded without parliamentary approval. Key was his analysis of where power lied. Bismarck distinguished between resistance that could delay decisions and resistance that could stop him. Once he saw that Parliament could protest but could not actually stop him, he simply went around them. The same ice-cold logic shaped his foreign policy. Bismarck's goal was to unify Germany, but he knew Prussia could not survive a war against several powers at once. So, before any fighting began, he focused on isolation and timing. In 1864, Prussia fought Denmark over Schleswig and Holstein. Prussia and Austria acted together. At this stage, Austria was an ally. Acting together, they isolated Denmark diplomatically and beat the Danes in a short and successful war. But the alliance was temporary. Once Denmark was defeated, Bismarck's goals changed. Unifying Germany under Prussian leadership now required removing Austria from German affairs. Cooperation no longer served that objective. So, only 2 years after fighting side by side with the Austrians, Prussia declared war. And before the fighting began, Bismarck ensured that Austria stood isolated. Diplomatic assurances kept Russia neutral. France was kept uncertain and unprepared. The war was short. Within weeks, Austria was defeated, and Bismarck once again looked beyond his own success. He insisted on restraint. Austria was not humiliated, but only removed from German affairs. Because for Bismarck, alliances or wars were tools, not commitments. Allies were used as long as they served an objective and discarded the moment they stood in the way of the next, bigger one. In 1870, conflict with France followed. Bismarck edited the Ems dispatch to provoke France into declaring war first. Prussia looked defensive, and again, other powers stayed out. The war was short and decisive. Prussian-led forces defeated France and captured Emperor Napoleon III. The victory changed the political balance inside Germany completely. In January 1871, the German Empire was proclaimed at Versailles, with the Prussian king crowned as German emperor. Germany was finally unified under Prussia and Bismarck's leadership. Bismarck never tried to solve every problem at once. At each stage, he focused on the one obstacle that mattered the most, the one that stood between him and the next objective. Once that was dealt with, he shifted his attention. Bismarck pursued a limited objective at each stage, and he prepared the ground before acting. He reduced the number of actors involved, he prevented opponents from aligning, and he moved only when the balance was in his favor. Decisions were concentrated at the top, and timing was chosen to minimize any possible resistance. But this also meant that stability and long-term success depended on his constant judgment. Laws did not decide when to repress and when to compromise. Bismarck did. This brings us back to the contrast. Lincoln and Bismarck were not solving the same problem. Lincoln's challenge was cohesion. The country was breaking apart, and many powerful figures disagreed with him. Pushing them away would have deepened the fracture, so Lincoln kept his rivals close. Disagreement stayed inside the system, and conflict was absorbed, not expelled, as long as everyone remained tied to the same purpose. Bismarck's challenge, on the other hand, was action. Too many people could block decisions, and waiting for agreement would have meant continued paralysis. So he did the opposite. He kept his opponents apart, he prevented them from aligning, and he acted while resistance could still be managed. Both approaches worked because the risks were different. For Lincoln, the danger was things falling apart. Exclusion and pressure would have broken the coalition he depended on. So he accepted delay and internal conflict to keep the system together. For Bismarck, the danger was not moving at all. Consensus would have meant inaction, so he narrowed the field. He broke up any alignments, and he moved decisively when the moment allowed it. The difference was not personality, it was judgment. Lincoln saw a system that would break if people were pushed out. Bismarck saw a system that would freeze if decisions were postponed. Both acted on that understanding. The result was not short-term success, but lasting change. Lincoln preserved a union that went on to dominate North America. Bismarck unified Germany under Prussian leadership, reshaping Europe for decades. And they are both remembered, not because they led in the same way, but because they understood what their situation demanded, and they had the discipline to act accordingly. So finally,